In today's episode, we are going to pony on episode 3. Just really quick in summation, episode 3, we took a look at an introduction to the federal census. And in that episode, we touched on the federal census records available to you 1940, 30, 20, 10, and 1900. Those 5 census collections. We also mentioned the census collection of 1890, which was destroyed in the fire. Now, I did give you a little bit of homework, and I would really love to check some of your homework out, but at this stage, can't really do that. Today, I will be presenting to you information on the remaining census records available to you. That being the census records from 1790, continuing all the way through 1880. Now that's quite a bit that we're going to have to go through. Some of them I'm going to encapsulate and bring together because they do share a lot of commonalities that I think we don't really need to go into it in depth. I think once we talk about that grouping, you'll be able to get an idea of what these census records can provide to you information-wise. I'd like you to take a look at this particular slide. And basically what that is, it explains to us how long it took census takers to complete their job. So, starting with the 1800s, you'll notice that census takers had 9 months to complete their endeavor. And every decade, it changes and changes and changes. And we have to understand that these census takers in the early time periods, well, at times you had to provide your own transportation. Your horse, your buggy, your wagon, and sometimes even the paper that you wrote on. In fact, it wasn't until 1830 that the federal government provided standard forms to these enumerators. Now, as we go through the presentation, I'm going to be touching very quickly on the duration of some of these particular census takings, so be aware of that as we go through it. We start today's presentation with the census of 1880. And at this time, the population of the United States was just over 50 million people. Now, the 1880s was part of an age of industrialization. America was in the throes of changing from agrarian to industrial. And this called for workers to come to the city. This called for immigrants to leave Europe and begin their journey across the oceans and venture to the United States. So we are going to see a massive, massive wave of immigration during this time period. Remember, the 1890 census is destroyed. This 1880 census is the beginning of that time period where you will now have a 20-year gap between the census records, 1880 to 1900. And you have this 20-year period of what could possibly happen to our families in that 20-year period. That becomes a challenge for us researchers because we now have to look locally, whether it be at the state, the county, the city, the town, township level. We have to get our information from there. Another thing about the 1880 census, and with the wave of these new people coming to the shores of America, these enumerators, these census takers, they are going to hear last names that they never heard of before. Katafias, Szymanowski, Hudzinski, Sienkiewicz. And they are going to wonder, what the heck did I just hear? And so the spellings that they are going to inscribe into the census records, make sure you give yourself a little bit of leeway and imagine, what did the census taker hear from this person speaking with this foreign dialect? If you keep that in mind and try to figure out some of the various spellings of the surnames you're looking for, that may assist you in your research. So here we have an example of the 1880 census. Some of the information that is going to be cited on this is the street name. If you're in the city, you will have street names. Now, they're not going to do it as far as rural areas are concerned, but just in the city, street names and addresses, which is going to come into play because addresses are so important in the research. And in fact, later on in one of the episodes, we are going to talk specifically about the importance of addresses and your research. And then we continue on. We have the names of the people in the household, their race, sex, age, the month of birth if a child is born within that given year. So from 1879 through 1880, if a child is born in that year, you will be given the month that the child is born in. The relationship to the head of household. Married, single, divorced, whether married within the year, then the occupation, school attendance, and also the parents' place of birth. Here's an example, and I emphasize to you all the time, look into the record. Look into the information, not just at the information. This particular family, I want to address these two citations here, Frank and Albert. And as you see, white males, 1 year old, but they were both born in May. That tells the researcher those are twins. And now they can pursue looking for information regarding the twins. The 1880 census was the first census to provide the name of the street and house number on the sheets. The 1880 census was the first to identify the relationships back to the head of the household. And also the 1880 census was the first to record the state or country of birth for every individual's father and mother. And that is an important clue to carry with you in your research. In my opinion, what is the most important first? It would have to be number 2. And that would be stating every member of that household's relationship back to the head of the household. As we continue on with today's presentation, you'll see how the lack of that information in the census records prior to 1880 may give you a little bit of a speed bump, maybe a little brick wall for you to try to figure out and get around. Every genealogist just craves information. We want more information on our families. This being the case, and I gave you all the three first, if we could go back in time and if we could somewhat influence the people that created this particular document, what would have been great to put on the document was, of course, year of immigration to the United States. It would have helped so much due to the mass of people coming in. It would have just helped us as researchers. But again, the census records weren't meant for future genealogists. It was meant to determine representation into the Congress. There's 1880. Now we come to 1870, progressing backwards. 1870, the first census after the Civil War. We see a population in 1870 of 38.5 million people. And as the citation above it reads, this census may, mind you, identify survivors of the Civil War. Now, for those of you who have the benefit, who are blessed with that ancestry back into that time period, the 1870 and the 1860 census are vital to your research because it's these two collections of census that you will use to compare and contrast. Individuals that you see on the 1860 census that don't appear on the 1870 census, and if they are of military age, mid-teens, 20s, maybe even into the 30s, you may be investigating whether or not these people were military in the Civil War. If they are on the 1860 census, they are not on the 1870 census, you have two options. One, could they have moved to another location and started a family somewhere else within an entirely different state, or somewhere else within the state, or possibly killed during the Civil War? Those two options. So here we take a look and see the 1870 census. This is where we wish we had that relationship information afforded to us. As you see, here we have the names of all the people in the household. We have their ages, their sex, their race, their occupation. We even see where they are born. Pulling up this particular item from the 1870 census to draw your attention to the Hummels. We see here David, Kate, Henry, David, and Jacob. We can fairly guess and pretty much be confident in that guess that Kate is the mother of Henry and David. What we don't know is Jacob. His name, according to the census taker, is still Hummel. We could be fairly certain that Jacob is in fact the younger brother of David. Since David is 32, Jacob is 30, both born in Prussia. 95% confident, yep, they're brothers. Can I be sure? Can we be sure? No. Because we don't have that information that ties them in specifically. We don't have that information that ties them in concretely, that concrete piece of information. Guesstimate, yes. Concrete information, no. I'd like you to take a look at David, and that being right here, the youngest child. He was born within that particular year. We see that the census taker went through Toledo, Ohio on the 11th day of August in 1870. However, he lists David being born in August. Definite discrepancy in that. What did the census taker hear? So, in this situation, David is actually 10 months old by August. Therefore, his birthday cannot be August. You really have to watch the information that these census takers wrote. The age specification or the month. Personally, I would start here. I would look at birth records from Lucas County to see if David was in fact born prior to 1870. So I'd be looking for a birth record in around 1869. 1860. The population of the United States was somewhere around 31, just under 31.5 million people. There was a lot of turmoil going on in the 1860s. The pressure was building in this decade. And it seemed as though these incidents and the mentalities was putting so much pressure on the United States that it was very soon going to explode. We had what was called Bloody Kansas. And Bloody Kansas, the conflict going on to see whether or not Kansas was to be a free or a slave state. John Brown, abolitionist, wanted to get rid of slavery, took over Harper's Ferry, and there was that small military conflict. And then finally, in 1860 itself was the year of a presidential election. Stephen Douglas versus Abraham Lincoln. The Douglas-Lincoln debates, Lincoln-Douglas debates. The election, or the result of the election, will be what is going to send the first domino to fall and precipitate the Civil War that is going to last until 1865. This particular census was one of those census that took 5 months, that was expected to be completed in 5 months. That would have been November. The presidential election in November. And again, Abraham Lincoln will win. South Carolina does not like the results, begins proceedings, and it'll be in December of 1860 that South Carolina will become the first state to secede from the Union. Then, from 1861, from January through the middle of 1861, other states will follow suit. And again, once again, leading up to the Civil War. This particular record of 1860, questions asked of free persons, very important designation. We see the name, age, sex, color, okay, occupation, value of real estate, place of birth, and then whether or not they attend school and the like. Again, what lacks on this particular census record is the relationship to the head of the household. Here we see Hugh Peoples, who is 23 years old, white male, farm labor, came from Ireland. Pretty much straightforward information. But when we take a look at Edward Peoples, who is 66, also a farm laborer, and also from Ireland, the question posed to the researcher is this: is Edward the father, or is Edward the grandfather? The census record does not give us any clue whatsoever. So to solve this particular dilemma, one would have to, A, go back to the previous census of 1850, research Edward Peoples, and to see how Hugh falls into line with Edward's information. If that information doesn't line up, then it would be, what could I find from Wayne County, Nankin Township, that would give me a little bit of help to solve that particular mystery? There are actually 2 federal censuses taken in 1850 and 1860. One was for free people, the other was for slaves. Slaves were enumerated separately, both in 1850 and in 1860. By just showing you this particular image from Jefferson County, Louisiana, it should be very striking to you as to what's lacking. And what's lacking are personal names. There are no personal names on the census. All they have, they count the slave, the age, the sex, and then the race. And that's it. The first name is very, very rarely provided. So if we happen to come up and take a look at Francois, I'm going to say d'Anjou, this would be the name of the slave owner. And we simply count the number of slaves, the age of the slaves, and immediately there is a problem. How can we differentiate between the families of the slaves? Who do we know? What can we use here to determine who goes with who? There's nothing there that helps us out on that federal census. We are adrift in this whirlpool of trying to find the information. And that's unfortunate. We do see here black, but we see M, mulatto. Mulatto, the combination of the white and black race. May lead us to assume that somewhere in this 65-year-old slave's life, that his mother had a relationship with a possible slave owner, maybe somebody in the household. We don't know. But that is the reason for the M there. Also pay close attention to the states that were included, which is here. Doing the research, it sort of shocked me a little bit that actually even the Utah Territory, people could have slaves there. And sure enough, went into the Utah Territory and discovered Reuben Perkins here with quite a number of slaves in Utah. A 50, a 49-year-old. Here's a 34-year-old female. And again, let's take a look at this very quickly. We have a 50-year-old black slave, a 49-year-old male black slave, and then a 34-year-old black female slave. The female slave is whose wife? You have two particular choices. The record does not indicate who this could be. And that is going to be a challenge for many African Americans as they're going through trying to do their genealogy. They run into this gigantic brick wall. This is a brick wall. But going through state records might have a chance to fill in the blank or access the Freedmen's Bureau's record after the war and after that institution was established. (1850). And you can see the lifestyle that was going on in Michigan at the time of 1850. You know, village life. This happens to be somewhere up in the UP and then Grand Rapids. And we see here the state of Michigan. We have the counties, larger counties up in the UP. I always find it fascinating to look at maps from way back then, because you never know what you're going to find. We take a look at Wayne County, and there's someplace called Truago, Truago. Well, I've been up and down river, never really came across that particular township. And we take a look even further in other particular maps. Here's a place called Waterford, just north of Plymouth. Thought Waterford was further north, our Waterford today. But here they had Waterford back then. Scharsburg, which is in Livonia Township. Just the various names just pop out. Delhi, over here in Van Buren Township. Here's Arsenal, over here near Dearborn. Fascinating names. What happened to these towns? Where did they go? Were they incorporated? And for a researcher, that's going to come into play. You will have to know the names of these old towns. So you can imagine if your research takes you and you see where a relative, you notice that they happen to come from Waterford. It would be, well, probably an honest mistake to look at Oakland County and look for Waterford in Oakland County. But when one takes into consideration the time frame, we have to look at Waterford in Wayne County. Always keep the years in mind when you do your research. It may even pay and be worthwhile, pay off for you in time, to try to find a map of that time period that you are researching, just to give you a clue as the particular geographical layout that you are going to be researching in. $1850 census. They consider this the first modern census. And trust me, what we see prior to this, it won't take any explanation whatsoever. First modern census. This census will provide researchers the first collection of wonderful information to help build your family tree. This first census, this first modern census, is going to begin listing people, their ages, their sexes, their occupations, and where they are from. Prior to this time, from 1840 backwards, you will definitely notice a difference. And the challenge is, for those of you who are going to be researching 1790, 1840, there is going to be many challenges for you in that time frame. But before we get into that, we still need to take a really hard look and see at the 1850 census here. Okay. Now this happens to be, Livonia Township, Wayne County. And we take a look up here and we see that happens to be the census enumerator's handwriting telling you that this person is from Massachusetts. Elizabeth, born in New Hampshire, Lysander and Phoebe are both born in Vermont. It's not until John has a Michigan birth date. What can we learn from this? We can actually see how the family is moving from point A to point B to Livonia. After they were married, we know that somewhere Lysander was born 1834, somewhere in Vermont. Phoebe, 1836 in Vermont, and then John here, born in Michigan in 1840. So during the difference here, we know they traveled from Vermont to Michigan. And if I was researching the Lewis family, now I would be able to narrow my search between this time period to see if I could find a definite time where they came to the state of Michigan. How would I find that? Land records. He is a farmer, probably has land here somewhere in Livonia. Track him down, land records in Wayne County. See when he purchased that land, that gives me an even more precise time when they came to Michigan. Another example of the 1850 census, this being from the city of Detroit. Now, my guess would be this particular listing is from possibly a boarding house, because we see just a wide collection of individuals listed in there. In fact, there is only two brothers, that being Alexander and Thomas Arnold here, who are family members. We see the listing of where they were from, where they were born, place of birth. But there's a name on there that deserves attention. That name is right down here. Alexander Grayson. The age is a little distorted. That's due to the fact that the census taker misplaced probably determining the sex of that particular individual. So instead of putting the M here, he started to write M here. You can barely make out a 3, and whatever this digit is here, we don't know. But at least I know that Alexander is 30-some years old. Male, and he is black. A free black man in 1850 in Detroit, working as a cook somewhere, born in the state of Kentucky. So somehow he made his way. Could the family have made the way? Don't really know. But somehow he got from Kentucky to the state of Michigan, and now he is a free black man working as a cook in the city of Detroit. Born 1820 in Kentucky. Again, if I was researching that, not too much to go on. Maybe born in 1820-ish. Kentucky birth records, not sure how far back they go. That would be a challenge to try to find information on that. One would have to actually maybe proceed further into finding records, Wayne County, city of Detroit, maybe mid-1850s, and then after collecting those records, seeing what's garnered in there and then working your way back that way. Slave record. Mentioned before that slave schedules were done in 1850 and in 1860. Again, the slave schedule cites the name of the slave owner, the number, age, sex, and color of the slave. So again, we see that the total lack of given names. But we can still find interesting information on these particular records. Thomas, I'm going to say D-E-N-M-E-A-D, Denmead, who is the slaveholder in Berkeley County, Virginia. He has a female slave, a 28-year-old female slave. And look at the information right below it. Another slave, a 3-month-old female mulatto. That tells us that this child was born to this particular female slave and Thomas. There's a pretty good chance that happened. So Thomas would be the father of that particular child. Again, we are reading into the records. Always keep that in mind. Utah Territory. We go back to Utah. This particular record from Utah in 1850 is very different than the ones I've showed you before. Strikingly different. And the reason why I say strikingly different is due to the fact that this census taker actually provided given names of the slaves, the first names of the slaves in the column. Not just the ages. So, Oscar, Nelson, Mary, Henderson, Rose, Villock, Toby were all slaves of William Crosby here. African American genealogical research would have benefited hands down if these given names were in fact provided to, if census takers would have inserted them into their listings here. First names, phenomenal. The record also tells us something else, something that we can't overlook. That right here, under the remarks, it seems as though all of these people, all of these slaveholders and their slaves are heading to California. Why are they heading to California? 1849 gold rush, are they thinking that they're going to head over there and participate? I personally don't know. That would be information that the researching family would have to investigate. But it's a clue that if I am going to be looking for information concerning these people, I will start in California and not Utah for, like I said, more information. 1850. I'm going to throw you a curveball here. We're going to change up the strategy, and we are now going to look, we're going to jump to the census of 1790 and investigate 1790 to 1840. Here is the land maps of the United States, 1790 and in 1800. And you can relatively see the density of population. In 1790, the Mid-Atlantic states in the northeast heading into the south. 1800, again, northeast, a little bit spreading west into Pennsylvania, the Ohio Valley. In 1790, nearly 4 million people were in the United States. In 1800, it jumped to 5.3 million people. So this being, what, a 35% increase? Well, we're not done yet. 1800. Let's continue on. Let's watch the population. Here we come with 1810. We see 1810 is expanding even further up, further out. Pennsylvania has now collected southern Ohio, central and southern Ohio. They're just under the Indiana Territory. They're following the Ohio River. There's the Mississippi River coming down. People settling in New Orleans, Louisiana, the Mississippi River Delta. And the population at that time, 1810, is just over 7 million people. An increase, maybe again, 35, 36%. 1820, now it's getting a little bit packed here. All the way up and down the coast, heading into the interior of the United States. Mississippi River, Missouri River, Ohio River. People are flocking to the United States. They're coming. They're leaving Europe. They're leaving their lands. And they're coming to the United States. 9.6 million people arrive in 1820, or are there in 1820. The Michigan Territory, still a territory, still a territory. 1790, 1800, 1810, 1820. 4 census. Just some facts. What you are about to see, I have to emphasize that the information that was recorded in these censuses were not geared for family history, they were geared for counting. That was it. The purpose of the census was to appropriate seats in Congress. The government did not provide forms at this time period. It was up to the enumerators to provide their own paper. And this in itself poses a challenge to you researchers. Now myself, my families came over in the 1870s. I do not have the privilege of researching these records unless it's somebody coming into the library and asking for assistance. None of my families are from that time period. But census enumerators could write the information required any way whatsoever. There was no uniformity. If you are going to be researching these particular censuses, you'll be at home in front of your computer, probably have a nice cup of coffee going, maybe a pot going, and just sit down and relax and start researching. Here we see the states included on the 1790 census. The information was head of household and the numbers in the household. But not every location is going to be available to you. And if you go into Ancestry Library Edition and MyHeritage and Family Search, you will see what areas will not be cited on these particular census records. For example, the one in 1790, you'll notice that states missing are Delaware, Georgia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia. That's because all of these records were burned during the War of 1812. So census records were not simply put aside and kept, nice and pristine. They suffered damage, as we saw with the 1890 records, even the 1790 records. 1800, missing are Georgia, Kentucky, New Jersey, Virginia, Tennessee, Indian, Mississippi, and Northwest Territories. And again, information, head of household, and the ages of people contained therein. And it goes on and on and on. Here is an example of a 1790 federal census record from New York. That's it, folks. What you see here is head of household and the number of males and females according to certain ages, along, mind you, slaves. New York, Queens County, 1790, slaves existing. So the enumerator of that particular district cited that information this way. We jump ahead 30 years, the United States Federal Census, Michigan, Wayne. This is Michigan territory. Again, what do we see? We see heads of household. And what do we see missing? We see tally marks for all those individuals who are part of that household. Nope, let me go back one. This definitely poses a quandary. Again, how would a researcher go about to fill in the blanks? Those are a lot of blanks to fill in, you know. We go with what is available at the state level, what is available at the county level, and fill in the blanks that way. Both looking at civil records and quite possibly church records. Are those available online? Some are, some aren't. You may have to contact the government. You may have to contact the county. You may have to contact the churches, the dioceses, and to see what records are indeed available and research that way. So we will have to go out and take our research outside of our computer. 1830, 1840. 1830, we have a population of 12.8 million. 10 years later, it goes up to 17 million. We take a look at both maps, and the first thing that we should notice is the definite westward expansion that is going on in 1830 and going on in 1840. For the 1830s, we still see Michigan territory here. We see people settling in the Detroit area. And by 1840, Michigan has become a state. And I found this to be a little bit interesting. For the cities that they have listed within the state of Michigan, we have Detroit, we have Lansing, we have Michilimackinac up here, and right there, they have Grand Haven. I just found that, nice bold letters, I just found that interesting, why they would list Grand Haven. For all you Michigan history buffs out there, maybe some of you know that. Maybe that'd be something you'd want to be interested in looking up. And here's just a blow-up of that particular. You can see Grand Haven, oh, here's Mackinac here, Lansing, and Detroit. 1830 census. Both of these particular census records will still continue to list head of families only. However, this is the first time where the federal government is going to provide uniform forms for the enumerators. We don't have to try to guesstimate what the census enumerator was trying to record from previous decades, 1790, 1800, 1810, 1820. Now it's on a universal form that we should be able to follow all the way across. Pay close attention to the columns that contain the letter D. It indicates a death within that particular age bracket. Look inside the record. We see here and here. So within that particular family, within that year, a female between the ages of 6 and 10 died, giving you a clue to research that. Also, women can also be heads of families, not just men. We take a look at Elizabeth Coleman, and Elizabeth is cited in this. Along here, we see that probably a son between the ages of 24 and 30 is living with her, though she is still considered head of household. 1840, first census to inquire the ages of Revolutionary War pensioners. That's important. Both of these censuses will have be comprised of two sheets, one for the whites, one for the blacks. The 1840 census will break down ages into 5-year increments and will also cite foreigners not naturalized. A clue into this person is residing in a particular area, came to the United States, but is yet to be naturalized. Unfortunately, they do not provide where they are coming from. 1840, the first census that listed Livonia as a township within Wayne County. And here we have an example of the 1840 census, giving you names of heads of families and all those individuals thereafter, all the kids that came along with it. I just wanted to show you an example of a full-blown sheet from the 1830 census. Remember, excuse me, how I mentioned that this was a two-part sheet, and I tried my best to incorporate that into one slide. So, the city of Detroit, the enumerator is going to list the heads of families, all those contained therein, in that household, and on the second page, City of Detroit, doesn't matter that it's in the north or the south, it's still a two-page form. We'll see slaves and free colored persons. And you'll notice that under the free colored persons, you will see numbers. So we do have African Americans at that time within the city of Detroit listed as free colored persons. 1840. This being from Georgia, I just wanted to give you a certain perspective, one being from the north, this one being from the south. So Georgia, 1840, Burke County, Burke Township. Here we have the heads of household, all the people contained therein that particular household, and there are the slaves, male, female, and you can definitely see a lack of information regarding the free blacks from this particular document here. Nope. So that basically brings us to a conclusion of the federal census records. 1790, and we've made our way all the way through to 1940. Now, some of you out there may be blessed, and you have ancestry maybe going back even farther. Again, I'm not privileged in that for American genealogy. And if you have to go further and further back, well, come on. Estimated population in the colonies, well, in 1630, it was about 4,600 people, not that many. By 1700, it was about just over 250,900. 1750, 1,170,000 and change, and finally in 1790, 3,929,000. We can see the population growing. But again, what could possibly happen between the years 1607 and 1790 when the first census occurred? Well, just that. The founding of Jamestown, the founding of Detroit, an influenza epidemic in 1733, American Revolution, Declaration of Independence, Constitution was adopted. There was quite a bit going on. And even though none of this is recorded in a census, what does that afford you? If your family is there, where can you get this information from? You will need to access vital records and civil records, not on a national level, but on more of a local level. You would start in a colony. You will start in a city. You would start in a township and see what is available on Ancestry Library Edition, MyHeritage, Family Search. Go back to Cindy's list and see what they have available to you. Newspapers, birth records, death records, cemetery walkthroughs, tax books, wills. All of these pieces of information, these collections, are actually going to be there to assist you to try to fill in those blanks for family information that you cannot get in the census because the census doesn't exist. So that's where genealogy becomes fun. Again, we come to the end of the federal census. Next episode, I will be talking about something we all share, and that's names. Last names, first names, and even nicknames. And though we simply take for granted names, sometimes they pose a little bit of a challenge for us when we do our genealogy. And so with that, I'd like to bring this episode to a close. I want to thank you for joining me once again to look at the census records. So until we meet again, please stay safe, stay healthy, good luck in your research, and I sincerely hope to see you again when we take a look at all of our names. With that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.